So, Mark, over to you. Do you want to just introduce yourself and sort of jump right into the story, I suppose, wherever you'd like to start, really?
Yeah. Well, yeah. My name's Mark, for those who don't know. I know quite a few people in the room, but with Liz, who's behind the camera, we pastor the church here at Lifestream, and my story with mental health goes back really to 2007 in quite a dramatic way, from never feeling that I'd be somebody who would really suffer with mental health issues, and never really being aware of mental health issues. Prior to that, I'd been a police officer. I dealt with a lot of stressful situations, sometimes very emotive situations, children dying, that sort of thing. And although it had affected me like anybody else, I hadn't suffered any long-term effects from that emotionally, mentally. But in 2007, we'd gone to live in Slovakia as missionaries. Things were going well, really, in our lives. There were certain struggles that I think there were certain stresses that were going on in the background that I wasn't aware at the time was stresses. But in 2007, I had what I now know as a nervous breakdown. And at the time, I wouldn't have called it a nervous breakdown. I just didn't know what was happening to me. But I had a nervous breakdown. But it all started, actually. So we'd been missionaries for almost a year, and I was speaking at a big youth conference, and there was about 400 people. It was quite a big event. I'd just been preaching, and I was in that frame of mind where I really felt I was living out my calling, my dream. Everything seemed to be going well. I stepped off the stage. I walked to the back of what was a big theatre hall. I sat down, and all of a sudden, just like a cloud. I describe it as a cloud. Just this heaviness came on me, and that was the start of a battle that would last for the next 3 or 4 years.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about how that sort of first encounter with mental illness, with depression, impacted your walk with God? Because you're saying that you were out in the mission field, you were speaking at events, you were leading. What impact did that have on your relationship with God?
The first few weeks, I just thought I was feeling a bit down. Didn't think too much of it, but and everybody has times where they just feel a little bit down, but it just snowballed from that moment onwards. For the next 3 to 4 months, it got worse and worse and worse, to the point where I couldn't function anymore as a normal human being. I'd just be weeping and not knowing why. I'd have total condemnation on myself. I'd feel terrible about who I was. I'd go through things in the past from many, many, many years ago that just I almost felt I needed to resolve everything in my life that was going on, and that became worse and worse, to the point where I was still ministering at the time. I'd be asked to preach, and I'd be in the toilets just before, weeping. I would sort myself out just before I was about to preach, go out, preach a message. Nobody would know anything was wrong. Come back out, would go back into the toilets, but be weeping again, not knowing what was happening to me. But really, it was at home that it was most affecting me. It was affecting me in terms of being a husband, a father. I stopped being able to even just get up in the morning. I was tired constantly, but not able to sleep. I started to have fits where I would get that stressed and that anxious that I would start to fit. And at one point, I was actually fitting in the bath, and Liz actually had to break into the bathroom to pull me out because I was starting to drown. It got that heavy and that depressing. There was a period of about 6 months where it was desperate. I was just unable to function as a human being at that point.
And in that time, was there anything that you were kind of able to hold on to, or any avenues of support that were really, really, really helpful in just managing that day to day and sort of starting that slow journey to recovery, really?
At first, it was just me and Liz. We didn't talk about it. We'd got a lot of people that were loving us and back here, but I was ashamed. I didn't know what was going on in my life, and I felt shame. And so I didn't talk about it until it got to the point where it was dangerous, and my situation was just getting worse and worse. Liz couldn't cope. I think sometimes with mental health we forget the effect on the loved ones of the people.
It's that who cares for the carer, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we just totally take it for granted. I think sometimes that people have a support network. And I think one of the things we can do as like sort of church community is actually like support the people that are doing the support as well.
Yeah. And it was really important because a lot of when we did start to speak, we started off we'd got a few close friends over there in Slovakia that we built up a relationship with, and we started to speak to them. Again, I wasn't able to verbalize what was really happening to me. I didn't know at the time. I was trying to rationalize it as all sorts of things. But at the time, I didn't realize how emotionally tired I was, how physically tired. We just moved countries. We were financially very, very tight. We'd gone from quite a good wage in Britain to living on, well, at one point it got that tight that we didn't eat for 2 or 3 weeks. And so we got all these pressures that I didn't realize were on top of us. I'd gone from being quite a person that was able to do anything that I needed to do, to living in a country where I had to take a translator with me just to do the little things. And I think in life, you don't realize how much these are actually affecting your identity. So maybe you lose your job, maybe this happens, and you don't realize the effect it has on your identity. And I don't think I realized what all that was doing to me, the internal turmoil that was causing within me. It was just a pressure that you put to the back of your mind until it got to the point where I just broke. And I just completely broke. For 6 months, I was in a desperate situation, but actually, it lasted 3 or 4 years beyond that, where I was just learning to cope with it.
And do you want to just tell me very briefly, and then I'll move us on into the next little bit of the story, but kind of how did you sort of begin that journey towards healing and move out of that place where you just couldn't function day to day to being able to get a little bit better and take those little steps?
One of the things is we did open up. We spoke to our pastoral support that we had around us, and that was obviously a big help. You're always looking for answers, and I'm Pentecostal, and so we always think the answer is just pray about it, it's sorted. But it didn't work that way. So
it very rarely does.
Yeah. So I was in that place of just really wanting a quick answer, but it was a long ordeal. And but that was the first step, really talking to people, getting that pastoral support. And then one day, when things, probably after about 6 or 7 months, when things were just starting to get a little bit better, but it would just come and go. It would come in waves of the depression, anxiety would just come in waves. And I can remember I was just, I think it was in the morning, I was putting clothes into the washing machine, just doing a daily task. And all of a sudden it came on me again to the point that I just couldn't function. And I just started weeping. And in that desperate state, when I'm thinking, how long is this going to last for? Is it ever going to end? And I'd been praying all this time, but just felt like there was a ceiling, like nobody was hearing my prayers. And I just felt God say to me 3 things. One was to finish the washing.
and keep Liz happy.
I know it sounds daft, but finish the washing. The second was to go for a run, because actually exercise had always been an important part of my life, but when I'd become a missionary, I'd sort of given up, I'd sacrificed everything and I'd given up looking after myself in a healthy way, and I just felt the second thing was go for a run. And the third thing was get on your guitar and worship. And I did not feel like doing any one of those things. I really did not. And I had to just force myself to get out of the house and do those three things. But it did lift. And I felt better that day. And I think what I did is realize something. One, in finishing that, the washing, it sounds daft. It sounds almost something that, how can that help? But it was a task that I achieved. And there was something rewarding in just completing a task. However simple it was all that I could actually manage that day. In reality, I was in such a state, it was all that I could manage. But I achieved something. And mentally, the process of achieving something, even something as small as that, gives you it does actually give you a chemical reward. It's a dopamine. But it gives you that little bit of a boost. The running, the health-wise was so important that I'd just given up on that. And the spiritual side, getting on my guitar, worshiping, it's the way I best connect with God. And I'd sort of stopped doing that. And I realized that if I was going to stand a chance of getting out of the place that I was, I needed to look after who I was physically, mentally, and spiritually. And in just that little moment, that day, I realized something. And it didn't end then, but it was a process that began that day.
Before I invite you to jump into that sort of second part of the story, I just thought I'd share with us a story that's really been speaking to me kind of off the back of what you said about taking little steps and looking after ourselves in the everyday. I have a really good friend called Naomi, and we're kind of, we chat a lot about chronic illness together and the impact that has on your mental health. And she shared this story of a guy called Naaman, who's in 2 Kings 5. I encourage you if you want to go away and read it. And he's often really, really overlooked. But Naaman has this skin condition that's really upsetting him. It's really ruining his life. He's really bound up in shame, because in that culture, to have that skin condition, it meant that you couldn't worship. You couldn't enter God's presence. And Naaman goes and he requests some help from Elisha. And he's expecting Elisha is going to tell him to do something that's like really incredible, really groundbreaking. It's going to be amazing, and he's going to have this amazing testimony of who God is and how he healed him. And Elisha comes back and says, "Go and bathe in this river 7 times." And Naaman has this little tantrum, and he's like, "I'm not going to do that. That's really silly. Like, don't make me do that. Can't you do something grand and amazing?" And as Naomi was telling me this story, I just felt like God was saying, "Charlie, you are Naaman. Like, I have given you the ability to look after yourself in the everyday. I've given you the ability to go to that river and bathe 7 times, 7 days a week, do your self-care." And in that moment, just really like you were saying, I just suddenly had this such a simple realization that we are so bad at taking care of ourselves as physical, mental, and spiritual beings. So I just thought I'd share that little story about Naaman. But yeah, so you started to kind of make that journey towards healing and start to resume being able to do the different things that you had to do for your everyday life and starting to sort of flourish a little bit. What happened next?
The whole process of really coming out of that probably took 3 to 4 years, and there was a lot of side issues that came off that. I think when you're in a depression and you're coming out of depression, you've got to be careful of things like temptation. Like most teenagers, I'd struggled with pornography as a teenager, but when I'd been freed from that for many, many years. But when I was coming out of depression again, it was again a temptation that I had to face, because you're always looking for highs. And so in in these sort of places, you're looking for anything that will just make you feel a little bit better. And so you get all sorts of temptations that you face. It affected me physically. I'd struggle to finish off a sentence sometimes because the anxiety would just overwhelm me that I just would start a sentence and not know how to finish it. And to the point that I actually started to get lost in shops when I would just go in and not know why I was in there. So all these sort of mental and physical things happened. But over time, after looking after they gradually got better. And about 3-4 years later, I would say at that point I was healthy again. But it had been a horrible, horrible ordeal. And I never wanted to face it again. But in 2014, and it was when we knew we were coming back to England, and I think I was overthinking things. A lot of fear gripped me about some of the things we'd have to do coming back to England. And I suddenly felt it all come on me again. So this was in 2014. And I think the thought of going through that was just unbearable. The thought that, that it could take that long. It was the worst, that period had been the worst pain I've ever been in, and that includes any physical pain I've ever been through. That period was so dark and horrible. I don't even want to go into some of the things that were going on really inside my head and my life and the emotions at the time. And the thought of going through it again was just so unbearable. And yet, I found myself heading in that place and just there again, not knowing what to do. One of the things I did do was speak to people. This time I realized that I was not going to let shame stop me from talking to people. I spoke to a lot of people. At the time, I was reading for 16, 17 hours a day, trying to find the answers to all my questions that I'd got. My brain was working overtime and then would just stop. It was a strange, the anxiety meant it was like I was on some sort of amphetamine, because my brain would just overwork. I'd read, study, and then I wouldn't even be able to put a sentence together. My brain would just stop. And I prayed together. And the one little bit of hope I had was that Liz just had a feeling that God was saying, it won't last this time. It's going to be quick. And I just hoped that was true. I didn't believe it, but I hoped it was true. 3 weeks into that, I was in a desperate state. I was in the living room. Again, all through this period, I hadn't wanted to commit suicide. I'd been praying for God to take my life, and I'd putting myself in dangerous situations. And I was in the living room in a terrible state, and praying but not feeling God at all was answering or even listening. And then I just felt God say to me, go and speak to Jessica. Jessica's my daughter. The first time I'd been through it, she was 6 months old when it started, and I hadn't been able to, for those 3 or 4 years, I knew I hadn't been the father that I needed to be. And I'd found it hard just being with the kids. So when it was happening again, I was terrified. I couldn't even be with the children, because the moment I was with the children, I just felt like I couldn't be with them. I couldn't be their father. And that moment in the living room, I was just in a desperate situation. I just felt I heard God's voice say, go to Jessica, tell her what's happening to you, and ask her to pray for you. Bearing in mind, she was 7 years old at the time. I walked into she was in the bedroom, she was about to go to sleep. I walked into her, and I couldn't even tell her in first person. I had to speak in third person. And I just said, Jessica, Daddy wants to tell you. And when I say this, I said before, there's one bit where I get upset telling this story, and this is the bit. I said to her, Daddy wants you to know that he's ill. He's ill at the moment, and he's not going to be able to show you the love that he wants to show you, but he wants you to know that he loves you. And then I just asked her to pray for me. she prayed for me. In a 7-year-old way of praying. I think it was something like, "Dear God, please heal Daddy." I went out of that room, in the living room, and the only way I can describe it is I literally felt like somebody had taken the top of my skull off, lifted out my brain, turned it round the right way, and put it back in, and put the skull back on. I literally felt like my whole way of thinking suddenly changed. And I knew I was completely healed from that depression that day. And I didn't dare talk about it because, you just feel, I can't talk about it, it's going to, and then, but I just knew that I knew that it had gone. And that was in 2014. And I've been through lots of war situations, lots of pressurized situations, and it's not even come near. And I was healed that day. You see, there's physical things that take place when you're in that sort of place. And that day I was physically healed. Now I know whether you believe in healing or not, I do. But all I can say is, I was seriously ill. My daughter prayed for me, and then I was 100% right. And it happened in an instant. So, yeah, I experienced both things. I experienced a long, drawn-out healing process, and I've also experienced something where I just believe God just touched my life, and I was healed in an instant. So there's two sides to that testimony, really. That's my story.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. I'm just aware of time. We've literally just got a few minutes.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons why I asked if you'd be willing to share with us, because I think sometimes we put too much emphasis on one or the other.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in therapy. Like, Amy is kind of smiling because I've literally, we've had so many conversations about me just being like, everybody should, embrace Jesus in therapy. It will not necessarily make your life perfect, but it's a really good idea. But sometimes that doesn't actually leave space for God to do what God's going to do. But equally, if we go on the other side and we say it's all about healing and it's all about the Holy Spirit working in your life, we don't make space for that self-care practice and getting that support practically that we need. I really encourage you, if you fancy a chat with either of us this evening, do just grab us. We're happy to have a conversation. Well, I'm assuming you're happy to have a conversation with us. And we can go into that in a little bit more detail and chat with you about that, where we sit on those things. But just really briefly to finish, wrap us up. What kind of 3 top pieces of advice would you give to someone who's really struggling with their mental health right now in this moment?
The first thing is this. Like I said, I've experienced two things. One is the first time where I was in that place for 3 to 4 years. I had people pray over me regularly for healing and never received it. And the second time I received healing, I believe God loved me every bit as much in both situations. And whatever your situation, whatever you're facing, God adores you. He loves you. He cares for you, right as you are, where you are right now. So that's the first thing I would say.
Pretty good thing to say, not gonna lie.
The second is care for yourself and those around you. It's not selfish to do that. If you want to care for others, if you want to be the best you in order to really love other people as you should, then take time over these things, caring for yourself physically, maybe time to stop walking or something, emotionally, spending time with loved ones, having those conversations, going out for coffee with people that encourage you, and spiritually spending that time with God. Take care of yourself in those 3 areas. And fourthly, just keep coming back to God. He loves you in your situation. Thirdly, that was not fourthly. I just skipped one.
Just squeezing an extra one in there.
Yeah. Just keep coming back. It doesn't matter whether you're healed, not healed, whatever your situation, just keep coming back to God because he loves you. He loves you so, so much in your situation. But can I just say something for the church? I know I'm squeezing time here. If somebody's facing this situation, first of all, remember, when people are ill, they don't always speak rationally, and I wasn't rational when I was in that situation. So just show grace. Just be willing to listen, not take too much on board. Just be willing to listen. You don't have to answer their questions. Most of the questions will not even be rational. Just be willing to listen. And secondly, make sure you also show support for those that are having to deal with those that are mentally ill as well. Mm-hmm. I think one of the lessons we learned was the lack of support that Liz got, not through any neglect. It's just that people don't realize how much, if you're married to somebody or you've got a son, a daughter, or somebody really close who's suffering in this way, the burden you carry is extreme. And we need to start looking as a church towards those people as well who care.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for the courage and the willingness to be honest and open with us. I'm just going to pray for you really quickly, and then I'm going to invite Tom to come back up to kick off our time of open worship. So, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for Mark, Liz, and their family. Thank you that you've walked this road with them both, that you've been there in all the ups and downs. We thank you that you've spoken through Mark's testimony tonight, that you've given him a heart to share and a heart to encourage others to start looking after themselves. And Father, I pray for that continued blessing, that continued healing, Lord, that would just rest over their family in the weeks and months ahead. Amen.
Every burden, every crown, this is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down. Every lie and every doubt, this is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. And I will make room. Do whatever you want to do whatever you want to do. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to do. Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. I will make room for you. Do whatever you want to. Do whatever you want to do. I will make room for you. To do whatever you want to. Do whatever you want to do. I will make room for you. To do whatever you want to. Do whatever you want to do. I will make room for you. Do whatever you want to. Do whatever you want to do. Shake up the ground of all my tradition. Break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition. Break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Jesus, your way is better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition. Break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Shake down the ground of all my tradition. Break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Jesus, your way is better. I will make room for you. Do whatever you want to. Do whatever you want to do. I will make room for you. Do whatever you want to. Do whatever you want to do. Yes, I will make room for you. Do whatever you want to. Do whatever you want to do. I will make room for you. Do whatever you want to. Do whatever you want to do. Waken my soul. Hunger to sing, to thirst. First love, come awake. Do as you did at first. Spirit of the living God, come fall afresh on me. Come wake me from my sleep. Blow through the caverns of my soul, pour in me to overflow. my soul. To worship with all your strength, Spirit of the living God, come fall afresh on me, come wake me from my sleep. Blow through the caverns of my soul, pour in me to overflow. Spirit of the living God, come fall afresh on me, come wake me from my sleep. Blow through the caverns of my soul, pour in me to overflow. Lord, come and fill this place. Let your glory now invade. Spirit, come and fill this place. Let your glory now invade. Spirit of the living God, come fall afresh on me, come wake me from my sleep. Blow through the caverns of my soul, pour in me to overflow. Spirit of the living God, come fall afresh on me, come wake me from my sleep. Blow through the caverns of my soul, pour in me to overflow.